A hush fell over the grand chamber of the Zalari Consortium, the air thick with the scent of exotic incense and the murmurs of alien dignitaries. Here, in this colossal meeting hall, deals that shaped the fate of entire civilizations were brokered. Today was no different. Seated upon a raised dais, the delegation of the Seraphine Dominion loomed over the assembly like celestial judges. Tall, regal, and draped in flowing silks woven with shimmering star thread, their presence commanded respect and fear. And at the center of them all, Lady Vaethora, a noble of unparalleled status, sat in quiet contemplation. The time had come for her to make her selection. The Zalari Summit allowed the most influential attendees to claim one boon, an asset of value from the galactic inventory, be it rare minerals, technology, or even strategic alliances. When her turn arrived, the assembly leaned in, expecting her to choose something befitting her power. Perhaps the etheric drive, rumored to fold space with terrifying efficiency. Or the Haver Warforged Legion cybernetic warriors who could lay waste to a planet. But as the holoscreen displayed the available selections, Vaethora lifted her hand. I have already chosen. A ripple of confusion spread through the hall. The Zalari officiator inclined his insectoid head. Lady Vaethora, do you require the selections displayed again? She shook her head. Her gaze was already locked onto her prize. A lone human, Captain Elias Vance. Elias, standing near a group of Terran diplomats, stiffened as all eyes turned toward him. The hell, he muttered. The officiator's mandibles clicked in bewilderment. You choose a human? Vaethora's lips curled into an enigmatic smile. Yes, him. The hall erupted in whispers. Humans were respected, feared even, but they were not commodities. Elias folded his arms. Yeah, no, that's not happening. Lady Vaethora, the officiator hesitated. A human is not an item for trade. Vaethora stood, her towering form radiating an ethereal glow. Her voice was soft, yet it carried undeniable authority. Then he may walk freely. But understand this, by ancient right he was offered as a choice. And I have chosen. She turned to Elias, her golden eyes locking onto his. You are mine. Elias Vance clenched his jaw as he sat in the lavishly decorated chamber aboard the Eclipse Seraph. The room, if he could even call it that, was an architectural marvel. Smooth metallic walls pulsed faintly with a soft golden light, shifting as if alive. The air carried a subtle, intoxicating fragrance, neither artificial nor natural, but something distinctly alien. Despite the luxury, Elias felt like a caged animal. He had barely resisted when Vaethora's guards, tall, silent figures clad in ornate battle armor, had escorted him aboard her vessel. They hadn't forced him, per se, but the way they moved, their unreadable expressions had made it clear. He was coming with them, whether he liked it or not. And now, after what felt like hours, the woman responsible for all of this finally entered. Vaethora moved with an unnatural grace, her long, flowing robes shifting like liquid light. She regarded him with quiet amusement as she took a seat across from him. I understand this is unexpected for you, she said, her voice smooth, melodic. Elias scowled. Unexpected? Lady, you just declared to an entire intergalactic summit that I belong to you. I'd say that's a little more than unexpected. Her lips curled slightly at the edge, though whether it was amusement or something else, he couldn't tell. You misunderstand, she said, folding her hands. I did not claim you as a possession. I selected you because you are valuable. Elias let out a humorless chuckle. Yeah? And what exactly am I valuable for? I don't have state secrets. I'm not some genius engineer. Hell, I'm not even a diplomat. I'm just a guy trying to keep his ship running and stay out of trouble. Her golden eyes studied him for a long moment before she responded. You assume that value comes only from knowledge or status, she mused. But there are things your species possesses that no amount of wealth or technology can replicate. Elias crossed his arms. Enlighten me. Vaethora stood and paced to the edge of the chamber, gazing out through a translucent panel that offered a breathtaking view of the distant stars. My people, the Seraphine, are old, she began. We have mastered sciences that seem like magic to most. We have expanded our dominion across thousands of worlds. We have achieved what lesser races would call perfection. She turned to face him, and for the first time, Elias saw something flicker across her expression. But perfection, she continued, is a slow death. Elias frowned. I don't follow. Vathara sighed. The Seraphim no longer change. We are stagnant. Our species has not evolved in millennia. There is no struggle, no need for adaptation, no push for innovation. Even our wars are mere rituals, orchestrated to maintain balance rather than to claim victory. She took a step closer to him, and Elias instinctively tensed. That is why we have studied humanity. Of all the races in the known galaxy, you alone continue to defy expectation. You survive no matter the odds. You grow stronger from adversity. You break every rule the cosmos has set in place. And that is what we lack. Elias narrowed his eyes. So what? You think you can just learn that from me? A knowing smile touched her lips. No, Captain Vance. I know we can. Something about the way she said it sent a shiver down his spine. Elias exhaled through his nose, forcing himself to stay calm. So let's say I believe you. Let's say you really think humans have something your people need. What exactly do you expect me to do? Vathara tilted her head slightly. That depends. Are you willing to cooperate? Elias scoffed. You think I'm just going to roll over and agree to be your science project? Her expression darkened slightly. You misunderstand again, Captain. You are not a subject. You are a key. He frowned. A key to what? Vathara stepped closer, lowering her voice. To the survival of my people. To the evolution of an empire that has ruled unchallenged for eons. Elias felt a weight settle in his chest. There was something unnerving about the certainty in her words, as if she had already planned every outcome. You want something from me, he said slowly. Something more than just observation. Her silence was answer enough. Elias took a step back. Yeah, no. I've seen how this goes. You want to breed superspace elites, and you think humans are the missing ingredient. Well, count me out. A flicker of something, annoyance, passed through her gaze. You assume this is about genetics, she said. It is not. Elias hesitated. Then what is it about? Vathara finally stopped, standing so close that he could see the faint luminescence of her skin. The way her golden irises seemed to swirl like liquid metal. You will see in time, she said. But for now, I will not force your compliance. Elias narrowed his eyes. Oh, that easy, huh? A small, knowing smile. For now. The doors behind him slid open with a whisper. Two of her guards stood waiting. You are free to explore the Eclipse Seraph at your leisure, she said. You will not be harmed. But know this, Captain Vance. Your fate is already entwined with ours. Elias clenched his fists, staring at her for a long moment before turning on his heel and walking out. As the doors closed behind him, Vathara exhaled softly. Her hand hovered over her wrist console, displaying a stream of alien data. Her gaze lingered on one particular reading, one that had confirmed her suspicions the moment she had laid eyes on him. It was not just Elias Vance's defiance that made him special. It was something buried deep within him, something that could change the course of history. And no matter what he thought, no matter how much he resisted, she would have him. Elias Vance wandered the corridors of the Eclipse Seraph, his boots echoing lightly against the unervingly pristine floors. For a supposed guest, he felt more like an animal in an elaborate zoo. There were no guards physically restraining him, no locked doors barring his way, but he knew the truth. He wasn't free. Every turn he took, every section of the ship he explored, he could feel unseen eyes on him. The Seraphim crew barely acknowledged his presence, moving with an eerie, calculated efficiency. No whispered conversations, no casual interactions, just purpose. It was unnatural. Elias exhaled, rubbing his temples. He needed a plan. He had no doubt that Vathara was dead serious about whatever insane scheme she had in mind, and that meant getting out before she made good on it. The problem? He had no idea how to even start. The Seraphine weren't stupid. They had taken his weapons, his communicator, hell, even his jacket for sanitization. The Eclipse Seraph was a floating fortress, a technological marvel that made his own ship, the Wayfarer, look like a rusted tin can. If he had any chance of escaping, he needed information. And that meant taking risks. After what felt like hours, Elias found his first real opportunity. A workstation, left unattended in a side corridor. A single, hovering console projected lines of text and alien symbols into the air. A control panel floated just beneath it, pulsing softly. Elias scanned his surroundings. No movement, no patrols. His heart pounded as he stepped forward and tapped the interface. The console's golden light flickered in response, scrolling through unreadable data. "Come on," he muttered, fingers flying over the controls. "Give me something useful." The interface was frustratingly advanced. No physical buttons, no recognizable command prompts. Just smooth surfaces and shifting glyphs. Elias cursed under his breath, trying every intuitive motion he could think of. Then, a schematic flashed before him. A map of the Eclipse Seraph. Elias grinned, scanning the layout. Most of it was indecipherable, but he recognized key areas. Crew quarters, engineering, the hangar bay, bingo. The hangar was his best bet. If he could get there, find a shuttle. A soft chime rang out. His blood ran cold. The console flickered, the alien text shifting. A voice, cool and knowing, echoed behind him. "You are persistent." Elias turned sharply. Vathera stood in the corridor, watching him with an expression that was more intrigued than displeased. Her golden robes shimmered in the low light, the intricate patterns seeming to move of their own accord. Elias took a half-step back, fists clenched. "Let me guess. Tampering with your fancy tech is off-limits?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, studying him as if he were a puzzle. Then, she sighed. "Had you succeeded? What was your plan?" Elias hesitated, then shrugged. "Steal a shuttle. Get back to my ship. Forget any of this ever happened." A ghost of a smile. An ambitious plan. He crossed his arms. "Yeah? Well, I like my independence." Her gaze darkened slightly. "You still believe you have it?" Something about the way she said that sent a chill through him. Elias scowled. "You keep acting like this is inevitable. Like I'm just going to accept whatever the hell you want from me." Vathera stepped forward, her presence overwhelming despite her calm demeanor. "You think of yourself as a prisoner," she said softly. "But tell me, Elias Vance, what have I taken from you?" Elias blinked. The question caught him off guard. Vathera continued, her voice gentle yet firm. "You are unharmed. You walk these halls freely. You have not been chained, nor have you been forced into obedience." She gestured around them. "And yet you feel trapped." Elias clenched his jaw. "Because I am." A quiet moment passed between them. Then Vathera did something unexpected. She reached out and, without hesitation, deactivated the console. Elias frowned. "What are you?" "If you wish to leave," she said simply, "you may try." His stomach twisted. This was a test. A game. Vathera was watching him, waiting for something. Elias exhaled, forcing himself to stay calm. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" A small, knowing smile. "Perhaps." He took a slow breath. "Fine. I'll play along. You clearly want something from me. So why don't you just tell me?" Vathera was silent for a long moment. Then, "Because you are not yet ready to hear it." Elias let out a frustrated laugh. "Oh, that's just perfect." She took another step closer, and for the first time, Elias noticed something in her expression. Something that wasn't amusement or condescension. Expectation. "You are more than you believe yourself to be, Elias Vance," she said softly. "And soon you will see why." His fists clenched. "You keep talking in riddles. Why don't you just—" A deep tremor suddenly shook the ship. The soft golden lights flickered. A distant alarm howled through the corridors. Vathera's expression sharpened immediately. "Stay here." She turned on her heel and strode toward the exit, her robes flowing behind her. Elias hesitated for half a second before following. Like hell he was staying put. If something was wrong on this ship, then this was his chance. His only chance. Elias trailed behind Vathera as she strode down the pristine corridors of the Eclipse Seraph, her movements precise and controlled, but there was an unmistakable tension in her posture. The alarms hadn't stopped. A deep, mechanical thrum reverberated through the ship, the kind that made Elias' instincts scream danger. They entered a circular chamber lined with smooth, hovering consoles, clearly the ship's command center. Several Seraphine officers, tall and clad in shimmering robes of deep blue, turned as Vathera entered. Their luminous golden eyes flicked toward Elias, and for the first time since he had arrived, he saw something new in them. Unease. A young officer stepped forward, bowing his head. Your Eminence, we have an intruder. Vathera's expression remained unreadable. Clarify. The officer tapped a floating glyph, and a holographic display flared into existence. Elias' stomach tightened. It showed a ship, sleek, black, and bristling with weaponry. It had forced its way into the Seraph's perimeter, its silhouette sharp against the stars. That's a Karakian war frigate, Elias muttered. Vathera's eyes flicked to him. You recognize it? Yeah. His jaw clenched. They're pirates, slavers, and they're not here to make friends. The Seraphine officer nodded gravely. They are demanding we turn over the human. Elias stiffened. They were here for him. Vathera's expression darkened. How did they track us? Another officer hesitated before responding. Unclear. But their weapons are armed, and they have already disabled our outer defense grid. Elias exhaled sharply. Then they're not here to negotiate. Vathera was silent for a moment. Then she turned to Elias. Why do they want you? He hesitated, his fingers curling into fists. I have a history with them. Her gaze sharpened. Explain. Elias exhaled. A couple years ago, I ran a job that put me on the wrong side of the Karakians. Stole a shipment of Terran refugees they were planning to sell off. Blasted half their fleet in the process. His voice was grim. I thought I'd lost them. Guess I was wrong. Vathera studied him for a moment, then turned back to her officers. Prepare for engagement. One of them stiffened. Your Eminence, this is a Terran matter. If we surrender him... She silenced him with a glance. Elias scoffed. So that's your plan? Hand me over. Vathera's golden eyes met his. No. Elias blinked. What? She stepped closer. You are under my protection. Her voice was steady, unwavering. And I do not surrender what is mine. A shiver ran down Elias' spine at the possessiveness in her tone. Then, before he could respond, the ship shook violently. The Karakian frigate had fired the first shot. The battle begins. The Eclipse Seraph retaliated with frightening precision. Golden beams of energy lanced out from its sleek hull, ripping through the Karakian shields like they were paper. The Seraphine ship was a masterpiece of engineering, agile, powerful, and deadly. But the Karakians were ruthless. They deployed boarding pods, small, reinforced craft designed to punch through enemy hulls and unload waves of heavily armed troops. Elias watched the battle unfold on the main screen, his mind racing. They're going to try and take me by force, he muttered. Vathera nodded. They will fail. Elias glanced at her. You sound pretty sure of that. She tilted her head. Are you not? He gave her a dry look. Lady, I don't make bets on my own survival unless I've got a gun in my hands. A pause. Then, to his complete shock, Vathera smiled. It was small, barely there, but it sent his pulse spiking. You wish to fight? She murmured. Elias squared his shoulders. I don't let people fight my battles for me. Vathera studied him for a moment. Then, with a simple flick of her wrist, a nearby console unlocked, revealing a compartment. Inside, gleaming under the dim light, was a weapon. A sleek, compact pulse rifle, unlike anything Elias had ever seen. He stared, then grinned. Well, he muttered, taking it. Guess I'm in. The fight for freedom. The Karakians breached the ship's hull in a shower of metal and flame. They poured in, heavily armored warriors with glowing visors and plasma rifles. barking commands in their guttural language. Elias moved fast. He ducked behind cover and squeezed the trigger. Blue streaks of energy erupted from his rifle, dropping the first two Karakians before they could react. Another rushed him, but Elias spun and slammed the butt of his rifle into the alien's helmet, sending him crashing to the floor. Across the corridor, Vaethra moved like liquid shadow. Her golden robes flowed around her as she twisted and weaved, avoiding enemy fire with unnatural grace. With a flick of her wrist, an energy blade ignited in her palm, and in a single, fluid motion, she cut through two Karakians in an instant. Elias stared. Damn! She turned to him, her golden eyes gleaming. You are impressed? Elias smirked, shooting down another enemy. Lady, I don't impress easy. The battle raged on. But then, a deep voice boomed over the ship's comms. Vaethra, give us the human, and we will spare your people. The leader of the Karakians. Vaethra's expression darkened. Elias clenched his jaw. He knew how this worked. The Karakians would never let them go. Even if they took him, they'd still slaughter every last Seraphine on this ship. He exhaled sharply. This isn't your fight, he muttered. Vaethra turned to him, eyes unreadable. It is now. Elias stared at her. She could have ended this, could have handed him over, but she chose to stand by him. He swallowed, gripping his rifle tighter. Then he smirked. Well then, he turned toward the enemy lines. Let's finish this. The Karakian warlord's voice still echoed through the comms, demanding Elias surrender in exchange for mercy. But Elias knew the truth. There would be no mercy. Not for him. Not for the Seraphine. Vaethra must have known it too because she didn't even hesitate. She lifted her hand and tapped a glowing sigil on her wrist. Transmission terminated. The comms cut out. Silence followed. Then the battle truly began. A war fought in shadows. The corridors of the Eclipse Seraph became a war zone. Elias and Vaethra moved as one, ducking behind cover, coordinating their attacks, cutting down Karakians as they poured in like a relentless tide. Elias' borrowed pulse rifle hummed with power as he squeezed off precise shots, each blast hitting home. He moved with sharp, practiced efficiency, instincts honed from years of surviving in the worst parts of the galaxy. Vaethra, however, she was something else entirely. She didn't just fight, she flowed. Her golden energy blade cut through armor like it was nothing. Every movement was precise, calculated, lethal. She anticipated attacks before they happened, dodging plasma fire by millimeters, her golden eyes glowing in the dim light. Elias almost felt bad for the Karakians. Almost. The plan. But they were running out of time. More boarding pods incoming. Vaethra's voice was calm despite the chaos. If they establish a foothold, we will be overrun. Elias grimaced. Yeah, I figured. They needed a way to turn the tide. Fast. What about the ship's core? Elias asked. Vaethra gave him a sharp look. You wish to destroy my vessel? No, Elias huffed. I'm saying we use the power surges from your core to disable their ship. Overload your energy output, fry their systems. One of her officers hesitated. That could damage our own systems as well. We don't have a choice, Elias cut in. Vaethra studied him for a moment. Then finally she gave a slow nod. Very well. She turned to her officers. Reroute core energy to an overload sequence. Prepare to discharge it through our weapon systems. The officers hesitated, but they obeyed. Elias exhaled sharply. Now they just had to hold the line. Holding the line. The final Karakian push came hard and fast. Explosions rocked the ship as enemy forces detonated bulkheads to breach deeper into the corridors. Elias ducked as a blast of plasma tore through the wall beside him. He fired back, dropping 3 Karakians in quick succession. Fall back to the command center, Vaethra ordered. Elias moved, covering their retreat, his pulse rifle heating in his hands. His muscles burned, adrenaline pumping through his veins. The command center doors sealed shut behind them. They had minutes before the overload sequence triggered. Outside, the Karakians pounded on the reinforced doors. They're cutting through, an officer said grimly. Vathra turned to Elias. He saw something in her expression. Something she hadn't said yet. "What?" he asked warily. "If this does not work," she said quietly, "you must escape." Elias frowned. "And leave you here? Not happening. This is my ship, my people," she said. "I cannot abandon them." Elias exhaled sharply. "Look," he muttered. "I didn't survive this long just to watch you get yourself killed." He met her gaze, unwavering. "We get out of this together." A pause. Then, for the first time, Vathra truly smiled. A small, fleeting thing, but real. The ship shook violently. The overload was ready. The final blow. Now, Vathra commanded. One of her officers activated the sequence. The Eclipse Seraph roared as the ship's core energy surged through its systems. A golden pulse of power erupted from the vessel, cascading outward in a violent wave of electromagnetic disruption. The Karakian warship shuddered, its lights flickered, then died. The warship's engines failed. Their shields collapsed. And in the next moment, the Eclipse Seraph's main cannons fired. A final, devastating shot. The Karakian ship exploded. The force of the blast sent shockwaves through space, scattering debris in every direction. The remaining Karakians aboard the Seraph froze. Their morale shattered. The battle was over. Aftermath. The ship was a mess. Fires burned. Wounded Seraphine were being treated. The cost had been high. Elias exhaled, rolling his shoulders as he leaned against a railing, pulse finally slowing. Vathra approached, standing beside him. "We won," he muttered. She nodded. "We did." A pause. Then she turned to him, golden eyes piercing. "This battle was not yours," she said quietly. "Yet you fought for us." Elias gave her a sideways smirk. "Yeah, well, you fought for me first." Something unreadable flickered in her gaze. "You are free to go," she said after a moment. Elias blinked. "Wait. I chose you," she continued, "but I will not force you to stay." Elias stared at her. Then he huffed a small laugh. "Well, damn." He scratched the back of his head. "That's a hell of a thing to say." Her expression was unreadable. And Elias exhaled sharply. He could leave. He should leave. But he looked at the wreckage, at the Seraphine who had fought and bled beside him, at the alien woman who had chosen him over all else. "I think I'll stick around," he muttered. Vathra raised an eyebrow. "Oh," Elias smirked. "Yeah. Gotta make sure you don't get into more trouble." A pause. Then Vathra laughed softly. And for the first time, Elias thought that maybe, just maybe, he had found something worth staying for. The Eclipse Seraph drifted through space, battle-worn but victorious. Fires had been extinguished, the wounded tended to, and the dead honored. The Karakian warlord's forces had been driven off, at least for now. But Elias knew better than to think it was over. This wasn't just a skirmish. It was the start of something much, much bigger. A quiet moment. Elias stood on the ship's observation deck, staring out at the vast emptiness beyond. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't running, wasn't alone. Footsteps approached from behind. He didn't turn. He already knew who it was. Vathra came to stand beside him, her golden eyes reflecting the stars. She was still clad in her war armor, but her usual regal composure was softer, more open. "You should rest," she said. Elias scoffed. "Takes more than a boarding party to wear me out." She gave him a sideways glance. "You were nearly incinerated 3 times. "Yeah, but I wasn't. That's gotta count for something." She shook her head, a small, amused exhale escaping her lips. For a moment they stood in silence. Then finally she spoke. "You meant what you said?" Elias arched a brow. "About what?" "That you would stay." Elias hesitated. It wasn't that he was second-guessing himself. If anything, he was more sure than ever. But there was something about the way she said it, like she was bracing herself for the answer, like it mattered to her more than she wanted to admit. Elias sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Look," he muttered, "I've spent most of my life just looking out for myself. No home, no purpose, just surviving." He turned to face her. "But this," he gestured around. "This fight, this crew. His voice lowered. It's different. Vathara's expression was unreadable. Elias exhaled. So yeah, I meant it. Silence stretched between them. Then, to his utter shock, she smiled. Not the usual diplomatic curve of her lips. A real, genuine smile. Then I am glad. Elias blinked. You are. Vathara nodded, her golden gaze locking onto his. You are valuable, Elias. Not just as a warrior, but as something more. Elias' throat went dry. This was happening. An impossible offer. Before he could respond, a chime interrupted them. Vathara turned sharply. Enter. One of her officers stepped inside, saluting. Commander, the Seraphine said, we have intercepted Karakian transmissions. They are regrouping. Elias and Vathara exchanged looks. They both knew what that meant. The Karakians weren't going to let this go. The warlord had been humiliated. His forces had been crushed. He would be back. And next time, it wouldn't just be a battle. It would be a war. Vathara turned back to her officer. Prepare the fleet. We will not be caught off guard again. The officer hesitated. My commander. The council demands we withdraw. They believe the Karakians will not pursue us if we show no further aggression. Vathara's eyes flashed dangerously. That is a mistake. Elias folded his arms. So what happens now? Vathara sighed. If the council refuses to fight, then I will have to defy them. Elias whistled lowly. That's a bold move. Won't they strip you of your command? They may try, she admitted. But I will not abandon my people to a war they are not prepared for. She turned to him. And then, in a moment that took Elias completely off guard, she knelt. A Seraphine commander knelt before him. Elias' stomach twisted. Whoa! What are you doing? Vathara's voice was steady. Elias Voss, you are a warrior without a banner. A soul without a nation. He swallowed hard. And she looked up at him, her golden eyes burning with purpose. I would change that. Elias' breath caught. You have no home, she said, but you are welcome here. You have no purpose, but you would fight for us. I chose you once. Now, I ask you, her voice softened. Will you choose me? The answer. Elias stared at her, heart pounding. He had been given a lot of choices in his life. Most of them were bad. Run or die. Fight or fall. Survive or perish. But this was different. She was different. She had power, status, everything she could ever want. She could have chosen anyone in the galaxy to stand beside her. But she had chosen him. Elias took a slow breath. Then, without a word, he extended his hand. Vathara took it. And in that moment, something shifted between them. A choice had been made. A path set in motion. And neither of them could ever go back. Not now. Not ever. A future unwritten. The council would rage. The Karakians would come. The war would escalate. But Elias wasn't running anymore. He was home. And no force in the galaxy was going to take that away from him.